so we just had one shop to supply each of our basic needs. But part of it was also just Dasso. None of that could keep me from dreaming big dreams, though. My first great dream was to become an astronaut. Flying into space was just the biggest adventure I could imagine. The dream was fueled by East German television, which documented Soviet flights and the adventures of Sigmund Jähn, an East German who became the first German to enter outer space when he joined the Soviet Interkosmos mission in 1976. Jähn was such a hero, I imagine most East German kids at the time wanted to be astronauts. Soon, however, I decided that space might not be my thing, and I would be better off as a forestry engineer, because I loved the great outdoors so much. That dream lasted until I entered a special sports high school in Berlin, where I quickly realized that it would be hard to spend my life in the forest if I was going to become a world-class athlete. Once I got into the high school system, I thought journalism might be the best career path. I'd always loved reading, and if you can believe it, I was even in the poetry club for a while. I also enjoyed writing, so the idea of working for one of the news agencies was appealing to me. But once the wall came down, everything changed. Before the wall came down, life was just so much simpler and more relaxed. The communist system did its best to eliminate competition. There was no stress about careers, no stress about outperforming somebody else. For the average person, there wasn't a big difference in status among different professions. You have to remember that in East Germany, an engineer, a doctor, or a factory worker like my dad pretty much all made the same salary. Egon worked as a metallurgist for a company making farm equipment, and my mum, Edith, was one of the town's photographers. Egon was the big one in the family. He is tall like me and strong as an ox, but he was quiet, too, quite unlike me. As a kid, he was a pretty good soccer player, but he never really had the chance to pursue sports because of his responsibilities on the family farm. And once he was older, most of his strength was put to good use working in the factory. To be honest, I didn't see all that much of my dad when I was growing up, because he generally left for work before I got up in the morning. He would come home at 4:30 or 5 p.m. Sometimes we did homework with him, but I came to realize that when he came home from work most days, he was just exhausted. I saw more of my mum. Edith was able to arrange her work so that she pretty much only worked half days. That way she could tend to us 3 kids. She would get up with us in the morning, fix us breakfast, then go off to work. After school, we would often meet her at the photo studio and start doing our homework while she finished up. Then we would all go home together. My parents didn't have big important jobs, but they only made, say, 100 marks, about $50 less per month than a doctor did. And it wasn't a very competitive thing either, because everybody knew they weren't going to get rich anytime soon. This acceptance led to far less jealousy among people than you see today, because, well, people had a lot less to be jealous of. As a result, I do think that people were friendlier to each other back then. They just had a lot more time to spend in their gardens, talking to their friends, having a barbecue, or kicking a ball around. Also, although it might be hard to imagine today, consumerism basically didn't exist back in East Germany. For starters, our choice of brands and products were very limited. Motorbikes were all MZ. Televisions were Strasford. Cameras were all Praktica. It was the same for just about everything. Radios, bread, sugar, you name it. There were only 2 types of cars, a big one and a small one. The Trabant was the small car, and the Wartburg was the big car, so people weren't obsessed with the make, model, or size of their cars. And like just about everything else except food, cars were really hard to get in East Germany. They were so hard to get that, believe it or not, the standard procedure was that when a child was born, his or her parents would register the baby for a car. That way, when the child was 16 or 17, it would be their turn on the waiting list and they would get one. My parents were regular working-class people with 3 kids. My older brother Ronnie, me, and my sister Cornelia. We never had much money, and we didn't get our first car until I was about 15. But that said, we had what we needed. In some ways, growing up in Dasso was different from growing up in most other parts of the country, because our village was located on the border of East Germany and West Germany. As a result, we were more aware of the differences between the 2 cultures than most